Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Easy Conversations podcast, a podcast about having easy conversations. I'm your host, Furkan Dandia. In this week's episode, I'm excited to welcome Jamie Usher. Jamie is based in Melbourne, Australia. In 2010, Jamie lost 90% of his eyesight and remains legally blind with 10% of his vision. He spent the last 10 years dedicating himself to finding ways to better support people to build and maintain good mental health. Jamie is completing his psychology studies to fulfill his dream of becoming an accredited psychologist. He also provides one-on-one coaching for people online and in person. In this episode, Jamie shares his journey after losing his vision and how he ended up on the path of finding his purpose. Losing his vision also allowed Jamie to see the healing he needed from his childhood experiences. He has found a passion for helping others get on their healing journey because of his own. Jamie also shares how he is driven, and despite having 10% of his vision, Jamie is still performing in school and thriving in his day-to-day life. People like Jamie are why I enjoy doing this podcast. Please find Jamie on Instagram at _mind_tradie and online at www.themindtrady.com. And please leave a 5-star review at the end of the episode. I would truly appreciate it. Jamie, welcome to the Easy Conversations podcast. Thank you for joining me today and wanting to have this discussion with me. I'm super excited about the conversation we're going to have today. But before we get started, I want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and let the listeners know a little bit about what it is that you do.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me on. It's a real honor. Like it's whenever someone, especially internationally, asks me to come on their podcast, it's amazing. So thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me. So I guess what I do now is like as I'm finishing my psychology studies. So I just finished a pretty major part, which is my fourth year, my honors year. And now I'm applying for my masters that I've got to do to become accredited. So I'm still a couple of years off being accredited psychologist. Well, that's if I get in. I'm still applying. But so in the meantime, I do coaching and counselling with people in person and online. And that's kind of the stuff that I do at the moment. Plus, I work in a high school as well as a school counsellor. So that's what I'm doing at the moment while I'm completing my psychology studies.
Very cool. And just for the listeners, if they can't already tell by your accent, where are you based?
So I should have mentioned that as well. So I'm in Melbourne, Australia. So
Cool.
I've been here all my life.
Yeah, okay. And just to understand better, like what were you doing before? What was your background and what made you choose counseling and why now?
Yeah. Okay. Well, so I'm 38 now. So when I was 26, I was running my own business. I was kickboxing in the ring. I was like living a completely different life to what I was doing now. But then I lost most of my vision in I guess what you call it some kind of health condition. So within about 2 months, I lost 90% of my vision. And I guess life really started to change. From that, and there was no real definitive cause of why it was happening. Like it was not like I'd hurt myself in some way. It wasn't like an absolutely a thing that I'd caused from say kickboxing or something like that. It wasn't like that. They couldn't necessarily understand why it was happening. So that was like back and forth with specialists, and when we kind of found out that I ended up having this condition that, for some reason, when you're mostly with males, and mostly when you're around your mid-20s, this condition, which is like 1 in 25,000 people can experience, your body or your brain decides to stop sending the amount of blood that it used to at one point to your optic nerves, and then your optic nerves stop working the same way. So I'm basically blind in one eye, and I've got about 10% vision in my left. So that's what I rely on now. So I guess that wasn't a decision that I'd made to change being a tradesman or change what I was doing. It was just a thing that I had to do. Like I was in a really cool place with business. I wasn't necessarily as happy as what I could be looking back on it, but I was in a good position business wise. Like good money was coming in. I was getting more work. Like things were building up, and like I was happy in that way. But yeah, like for someone that can't read their tape measure, can't drive their car anymore. So there was just no way I could run that business anymore. So that was back in when was that? There was like 12 years ago now. So it was 2010, later 2010. And then there was like a 18-month period, nearly 2-year period where I was looking for work, like pretty strongly trying to find some kind of work. And then, after particularly after the first 12 months, I realized that I'm just not going to find work in something that is sustainable anymore. Like, other than doing like, pretty crappy jobs compared to what like my actual skill set is, or at the time. I'm like, I need to find something where vision isn't an issue, which is a weird, a weird one to go. What the hell am I going to do? That doesn't require me to have vision. And then just by chance, I ended up doing like this, a bit of study in like a community development area, as in like studying to kind of help communities in some way. Particularly those in like lower socioeconomic areas. And then I built up from there, where I started working with younger people because someone suggested I should work with younger people. It was not a thing where I thought I would be good working with younger people. It was just a thing that somebody had mentioned to me. And then from there, after I'd done youth work for like maybe 6 to 12 months, like around the area where I live, I said, I want to take this a bit further. I want to be able to, I guess, go a bit deeper with the work that I'm doing with the young people. And I guess I would have been the same way. So as a tradesman, if I had a way of getting better at what I could do, like if there was a way of learning and becoming more specialized in an area, like I was doing that. Like, so I guess it's taking that mindset of like, I don't just want to be this like, this average kind of worker. I want to be as good as I can, because that's when I find the most happiness, I guess. So yeah, that's where I started doing psychology back in 2013. Oh no, I had the idea back in 2013, but I started studying back in 2014. But for me to go to university was so like out there.
Yeah.
I'd literally never thought of it before. Plus, in high school, in my year level, I would have been one of the worst students ever. And I'm not saying that lightly. I was a really horrendous student in high school. My upbringing, my home life environment back in the day was, did not allow for someone to be, well, me anyway, with my personality and my brain. I couldn't do school back in the day. And I finished like a year 10, which is, I'm not sure what the equivalent is into where you are, but it's not great. It's not finishing school. So for me to even think about going to university was really out there. But even like to get in, I'm lucky that I've got this thing where I'm like, I want this to happen, and I'm gonna make it happen somehow. So I guess I guess I lack certain. Barriers that would normally prevent people from trying. Like when I get something in my head, I'm like, no, I need to make it happen. Which is, sometimes it works for me, sometimes it doesn't, I guess. But so that's where I started. So 2014, I started studying psychology, which was just, I reckon for the first 2 or 3 years, I still felt like a fish out of water. And then I started, because I studied part-time. So like a 3-year undergraduate degree, which I think you're studying psychology as well, or you did? Is that
I
right?
am,
Yeah.
yes.
You are? Yeah. So like a 3-year undergraduate degree turned into 6 years. And then I've just done my honours year, which was 18 months. So it's been like a 8 or 9 year kind of journey. Oh, yes, it's 2014. So yeah, 8-year journey, and there's still another 2.5, 3 years to go. So that's kind of where it all started for me back in then. That's where that transition started. And the transition wasn't a deliberate move. It was like there was an aspect of like I had no choice. But there was also an aspect of like the universe is definitely playing a part in this one. Like, like I wasn't supposed to be a tradesman anymore. I was supposed to be, I guess, working with people in another way. So that's how that all started.
Well, thank you for sharing all that. There's definitely a lot to unpack here, and I guess uh, we probably should go a little bit deeper. And the first question that comes to mind is, with the vision impairment, how are you able to even do school?
Well, that is a very good question, and you are the only person that has really asked me that. Particularly on podcasts, so that's that's a good insight. Um, so I do most of the stuff that I do is audio, as in like I can get like a journal article and my iPad or my phone or whatever it is, I can kind of take sections from it and I can just read it to myself or like play it to myself. So that's how I do it. Or if it's like a snippets of like a paragraph, I can zoom in and read it as well. The iPhone and iPad are really good for doing that kind of stuff. Even like say Word or Excel or whatever it is, they've got kind of relatively good audio functions and that kind of stuff now, which is really helpful. So yeah, for the past 8 years, I've been doing it that way. So and the ironic thing is that I guess I was born a visual learner. So like it still takes me like maybe 5 times, maybe 5 to 10 times of listening to something compared to if I was just to say read it once, visually back in the day. So just getting around that, you just learn that, if particularly when something, if you're not getting something, because some of the journal articles that we have to read are like, what the hell? Like I guess I can read this, but I'm
Yeah.
not absorbing any of it because I don't understand it because of, for whatever reason, whether it's statistics or whether just something that's not really like a part of your interest area. But I've just got to read it over and over and over and over, or listen to it over and over, and that's kind of how I do it. So 95% of how I do it comes all through audio.
Yeah, that's interesting you mentioned that, there's really no barriers for you. So that's good in this case. But when people deal with adversity, and in your case, the visual impairment, what what kept you motivated in wanting to pursue this path? And obviously, as you mentioned, it takes a lot longer for you to learn stuff than you would be able to learn naturally. And if I were to put myself in your shoes, it would be frustrating. Like, so what are you able to tell yourself, or how are you able to get in these moments to keep moving forward?
I think I think I'm really fortunate in a way that maybe because of, I guess, certain things that maybe, or certain experiences or certain environments that I was involved in, um, or I was, like I had no choice to be involved in when I was younger. I think there's a thing there that as an adult, and I've got more of like more power to control certain things now. I'm like, I spent a lot of my life not being able to control certain environments, or what certain people did or how they acted, for whether there was parents or step parents or whatever it is. This is kind of me looking back on it now,
Yeah.
but that I'm like, I had no power then, but I've got power now. And one of the things I can control is how much I value the things that I do and the things that I bring, and how I act and how I live. And if I make a decision that I want to do something, I'm following it through. Like things, yes, like all the time have happened across, say, particularly say focusing on the last 8 years. There's been just countless times where there's been, I guess, barriers that people have deliberately put up or not deliberately
Mhm.
put up, and I've had to get through. Whether it's working with teachers that just didn't understand, or lecturers that didn't understand, or just universities that didn't understand. But also on the other side of that, there's also been teachers and lecturers and universities have been incredibly helpful. So there's been a good balance of barriers, and people that
Mhm.
have broken them down for me as well. But it's like, just getting back to your question, it's like I'm fortunate that when I can make a decision, like that's it. I make it like nothing. There's no faltering. Or is this right or is this wrong? It's like, no, I've switched onto that, and I'm following that through until it is completed. So yes, I'm going to have frustrations and things. Like there's going to be things that annoy me and bring me down, but it's like my brain has switched on to this thing, and I'm attaining it. And it's like, that doesn't matter really what happens in the way of that. I'm going to make it happen. So I guess that's the thing. It's like, of course there's going to be ups and downs in whatever
Mhm.
I'm trying to pursue, but that's okay. It's not gonna, like, in the last 8 years or so, I've never gone, oh no, that's not what I want to do. I think when I first started, particularly doing the undergraduate degree, I knew I was going to finish it, but there was for the first 4 out of the 6 years, I wasn't going to pursue actually becoming a psychologist. I was just going to get a degree,
Yeah.
and then what it was, I got a pretty I got a decent mark in a really hard unit, in a statistics unit. And I'm like, oh, actually, I think I can do this. It showed, to prove to myself that if the more effort that I put in, the more focus that I put in, like that, it obviously equaled a better outcome. And then I'm like, you know what? I do want to pursue going further. So I spent the last 2 years out of the 6 years part time, doing better and working as hard as I can, and get the marks to get into the honours.
Yeah.
So yeah, I probably went a little bit off track there, but basically what it comes down to is just if I've made a decision to do something, that's it. That work.
Yeah.
Nothing's going to kind of get in the way of me making that happen. If there's a way, and if there's not necessarily a clear way, I'm gonna hopefully make a way.
Yeah, that's interesting that you mentioned that earlier, and the fact that you said the universe has kind of pulled you in this direction, and I find that very interesting. That's something I've been tapping into myself, but often when we're met with resistance or barriers, we can often tell ourselves that there's a lesson here to learn, and there's some sort of meaning deep down that we need to take out of this. Is that your mindset? Obviously, because the fact that these barriers or restrictions haven't stopped you or limited you.
Well, yeah. Look, uh, for someone, like, people will often say to me, like, when whether they're younger kids that I work with, or whether they're adults, it comes up a lot where they hear about my vision impairment and they'll say, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that," and I'm like, I can understand that that's like what
Yeah.
you think that's a thing that I wouldn't, and not that I need to hear, but you feel sorry for me for some reason. But I'm like, this has been the best thing that's ever happened to me. Now, I know that that's not a normal, your average kind of outlook or mindset
Hmm.
on something like that. But what started to happen to me was because of the time, particularly in the first 2 years of me having my vision impairment, I wasn't working, and I was able to have this almost forced into time to being able to reflect on all my other things that had happened to me in my life. The better that I started to see other things, so the more vision that I lost, the better that I started seeing things in my life. The better I saw my past, the better I saw my present, the better I saw my future. So, like, if that vision impairment didn't happen, I probably would have just remained as this angry, not angry as in like I was unhappy, but I had a really short fuse.
Hmm.
Could get into fights all the time. I was just, like, I looked for reasons to get angry. Like, if this vision impairment didn't happen, I wouldn't have the life that I do now, which is just amazing, like a perspective and a mindset that is grateful for
Hmm.
everything. And I talk about this quite a lot. Is like,
Yeah.
grateful and gratitude, not for when it's great, but even for when it doesn't feel great, because it's similar to what I was saying before. I've switched on and connected to something that is like, there's lessons in everything. So if there's a lesson in everything, how can I complain about a bad day, or what people call a bad day? Like,
Yeah.
it's a tough day, it's a tough time. It's like, yes, it's tough. Yes, I can be brought down. Yes, I can be in not great moods, but I know it's because of something. Either I'm supposed to learn a lesson, or there's a pattern of my behavior that I'm unaware of that is causing me to be a certain way. So look, it's this whole experience has given me, well, it's brought out a side of me that I'm like, yeah, I guess I feel so fortunate to
Hmm.
have. And then I'd like to share that with people, because yeah, we see it a lot. You would have experienced it a lot. We see it every day, like people that aren't happy with their lives, people that don't want to be here anymore. And I'm like, well, I am the complete opposite of that, and I want to try and give you that drive, that will, that energy, like even just a little bit of mine. So yeah, I guess that's this whole thing has given me being able to change my life around, so I can, I don't know, yeah, see things in a way where I can support people in that way, or try to anyway.
Yeah, no, and that's amazing, and I appreciate that. And you mentioned in the past you were a different person. So going through this experience, do you mind walking us through what changed? like, where did that gratitude come from? And often when we go through these experiences, there's we experience humility, and that's kind of what I've experienced. But obviously, with your situation, I want to get your thoughts and understand what shifted for you.
Okay. So, look, so as I mentioned before, like the vision impairment happened when I was 26. When I was so at that time, I was like, I guess I thought I was happy, as I was probably as happy as what I possibly could be with the
Mhm.
knowledge and the thoughts about myself and the world that I had. And but realistically, I was an angry man who hated himself. I hated who I was. Um, and I guess I always had like a resilience. Like I was
Mhm.
always going to find another way, and I was, but I hated who I was. The
Right.
outside world I was okay with. I'm okay with with people. I wasn't like resenting or I hated the world or hated people in it. It was just me. I just disliked me. But then this time that I was put into was, I guess, gave me time to find out why that was. It's like I also knew I had a innate understanding that for some reason I didn't like who I was. I whether it was I guess maybe back in the day I thought it was like a low self-esteem thing, but it was like it was on another level. It was like far deeper than that. I really did not like who I was back then. Well, I thought it was that I didn't like who I was. What it turned out to be was that I thought that people in the world didn't like me. People
Mm.
in the world were going to reject me, and people in the world were going to maybe potentially abandon me and all this kind of stuff. So, what this I guess there was two factors to it. That originally, although I felt okay about the vision impairment stuff. I never had the thought saying why me. Like
Yeah.
literally have never had that thought saying why me, which I'm so fortunate about. But I did say to myself in the first few months when it was like pretty tough, like, oh, who's going to want me now? How am I going to
Mm.
find a partner now? And that kind of stuff. That's probably as bad as what it got for me in that kind of, I don't say negative aspect, but probably about as negative as what it got.
Yeah.
But what it kind of gave me the time to do was to have a really good look at why did I feel about myself this way? Why would someone who definitely shouldn't be feeling that way? I've never done anything to not like myself, like in any way. I'd only ever been a good person, a nice person. Like well, there's been times where I wasn't always nice, but I mean, like, I was kind when I should have been kind. I loved when I should have been loved. All that kind
Mhm.
of stuff. Why would I feel like that? And it just kind of led me to particularly look on childhood experiences, um, and understand like why I didn't like myself, like,
Mhm.
or as I mentioned before, why I thought other people didn't like me. Like
Mhm.
what I've become to realize now is that particularly the emotional bond that we have with our parents or caregivers, whether they're your parents or not, but just say
Yeah.
particularly with my parents. So my parents divorced like 6 months prior to me being born. So my mum was or 3 months prior to me
Yeah.
being born. So my mum was 6 months pregnant, and my dad left on her birthday, which is obviously not a nice thing to do, but. Um, like I grew into a world where I think maybe when I was 1 or 2 years old, my mum had got a new partner who wasn't great, who turned out to be a violent man and
Yeah.
wasn't nice to people. And then my dad got a new partner who wasn't very nice to us at all when their new kids came along when I was maybe 2 years old. So there was like in different households there was so much stuff going on. So my dad had his own issues going on in, I guess, in his own brain that he
Yeah.
hadn't probably worked out. And then there was his wife, which is our stepmom, and there was pretty horrendous treatment, emotional kind of neglect, and all that kind of stuff that we experienced. And then there was like the physical violence on the other side, and I
Yeah.
had really taken on the protector role to my mum, which was like taking it on way too much,
Yeah.
like taking on to the point where I was trying to stop him being violent, and I was just doing things I guess I shouldn't have. I shouldn't have had to do that, but
Right.
I guess um, ultimately by me being a protector, particularly in that environment, was I was, like, if mum's okay, well then I'm okay, and that kind of thing. So that's just what we switch on to do in certain in certain environments. We just do what we need to do. But
Yeah.
I guess what these experiences and how I had to handle these experiences, like I was a product of that environment.
Yeah.
Like as I've spoken to you before, I spoke before, it's like I'm going to find a way to be happy in life. And back then, my child brain was like, well, I'm going to find a way to be happy. Without, I wasn't probably having those conscious thoughts, but I'm going to find a way to try and manage my environment. And one of those ways was, okay, well, I'm going to try and stop the 6'4" monster from hurting my mum. So then ultimately I'm okay. And that, which didn't really happen. He was still a monster, and he still treated us bad. He got violent with me. He got violent with mum, but I still tried.
Yeah.
But I guess what this kind of led me to be like was like I was a really hyperactive kid. I went to bed till I was 14, going on nearly 15, which is really common for people in those environments. I didn't think anything of myself at all for a whole variety of reasons. Probably because of things like how is a teenage boy going to be confident if he's still
Yeah.
wetting the bed? If I'm still trying to hide the fact that I wet the bed and stuff like that, it was just like there was no point in there really that would have led to anyone feeling good about themselves. And I socially isolated myself because I was, I guess, or hid things from the world because I was scared if anyone was to find out, well, that I'd be ridiculed and shunned, like, which is so
Yeah.
common. Obviously, like,
Yeah.
of course that's going to happen. And it's not like because my dad had his own things going on. It's not like he could give us positive, loving attention, whether we were in that house or whether we were just out of that house and we were doing things with him on his own. It was just not going to happen. And then my mum clearly had her own stuff going on, her own demons she was fighting, and like the physical kind of monster that was there as well. Like it wasn't like it no real part or like a for a sustained period was there like a positive, loving,
Yeah.
comforting, nurturing environment. It was so tumultuous. It was so up and down. It was like, but man, like every single part of that was supposed to happen to
Right.
kind of led me to be in this position now. And I think, you take all those factors and then you take, my personality, my DNA, the universe playing a part. All of it was supposed to happen, including the vision impairment, for me to be able to, I guess the way that I see it is all that stuff happened. The vision impairment happened, gave me time to like process it all. And now I begin living a life to, I guess, support people that maybe have gone through those things. And
Right.
like I
Right.
can help them create a belief about themselves and about the world if they need it, that despite those environments, well, let's help you process how that would have happened and how it had nothing to do with you,
Right.
and how you can begin to feel better about yourself. Because it's like what I feel so passionate about in working with people, whether I'm physically working with them as a client one-on-one or online, or whether I'm just making videos that people can listen to.
Yeah.
It's like, because I grew up in a world that, I guess, forced me is the best word for me to use, to think
Yeah.
that I was a pretty shitty person, feeling that like one day people were going to reject me, and so like I speak about this a bit where I'm like, oh, like it comes up a lot, like a fear of rejection. Well, I didn't actually have a fear of rejection. As a way of processing rejection, what I did was I just believed people were going to reject me. I didn't fear it anymore, really,
Mm.
or I didn't fear it to the same extent, because I'm just like, no, it's going to happen. So I've got to, like, I'm not like scared. I'm just like, oh, they're going to reject me, which is crazy. But I guess
Yeah.
that's just how I processed it. So it's like I love working with people in that way, that kind of we can break down those negative thought patterns, those beliefs that have clearly been created by environmental factors, or even and including in that environmental factors, the way they were treated, the way they were loved or disrespected or not given attention to. And then we can kind of work to see how none of that was their fault. The parenting that they experienced,
Yeah.
the environments they were in and all that, but particularly the parenting they experienced, it's like, particularly with me, this was a big one for me to realize the only person that missed out from the parenting that I experienced was them. So I
Yeah.
was, and not just my parents, even my, extended family have got, it just got stuff going on. So they whether there's diagnosis in there or whatever they've got going on, but it's like, so I'll give you an example. So I've got a 7-year-old daughter now who I love doing stuff with. I just love her, and we hug all the time. We've just got this loving environment.
Yeah.
Particularly, my wife has helped me with this. We've helped me be
Yeah.
able to see how easy it is just to love and hug and kiss all the time. Like I never had that in
Yeah.
any way, and not just from my parents or the step parents or whatever. Just from my extended family, it's the same kind of thing. It just doesn't really fit naturally in there. But that's just what I love, to be able to work with people, to go, just because you didn't experience that doesn't mean you don't deserve that now. Doesn't mean
Yeah.
you don't deserve to give you that yourself that now. Like, but if we grew up in a world that, like, particularly with our parents, or particularly, I think it's been, I think research kind of says, if you've got one good parent, or not good, I guess, one loving parent even,
Yeah.
then that can kind of really help you. But
Hmm.
if you've got, you say, two parents with stuff going on, and they're separated, and they've got partners, got stuff going on, like, it was just a perfect storm for someone that's to not think much of themselves, or fear rejection, or whatever it may, believe in rejection, all that kind of stuff. But I'm like, particularly because of this vision impairment, I was able to process it and then go, okay, that wasn't my fault. They had their own stuff going on. And then I had like an aha moment where I'm like, well, imagine all those other people in this world that didn't get that vision impairment, that didn't get that perspective, or maybe maybe they did, but they don't have that. They don't have the, I guess, I don't know, the whatever it is,
Awareness.
the awareness, the emotional
Yeah.
understanding, whatever it may be, or maybe they didn't have the childhood experiences that I did, or whatever it is. Like, I just think it's a perfect. I say storm, but I don't mean storm in a bad way. But it's like this
Yeah.
perfect thing that happened, that
Yeah.
was able to kind of transform me into someone with an understanding, not just understanding for my own life, but I do have, like, I've lacked confidence in my life
Yeah.
personally, but I don't lack confidence professionally. I can work really well with people, to sit down with them and go, you know what, let's, give me 5 minutes, tell me about your story, and we'll get a pretty good understanding pretty quickly. It doesn't mean that I can just instantly help them, but pretty
Right.
quickly I can use my listening skills, my empathy, and all that. And these aren't things that I've learned through my studies. These are things that I've learned to be able to go, I am giving you my heart at the moment, and you're going to tell me your story. I want to hear everything. I'm not going to be judgmental in any way. Obviously, I don't even have to talk like this. You just get this from my energy of, like, like, I want to hear everything, and I want to hear the nitty gritty. I want to, like, I love that, because it's like there's a little child in there in most
Hmm.
cases that is like, that is scared, that it thinks it's their fault, it thinks that they're no good, all because of these experiences that they had no power to control. And
Yeah.
I love getting down to that child, just to be able to, not so I could take them by the hand, but
Right.
I guess they can begin to, take their child by the hand. And I know, now, I think people have spoken about this a lot, where it's like the inner child and all that. I'm
Yeah.
not necessarily talking like this. Okay, maybe there is an inner child, but what I'm focusing more on is those beliefs about the world that
Right.
have been created in that childhood time. So I've looked at it recently. So it's like, some people say between the ages of 0 and 3. Some people say, birth and 3, birth and 5, birth and 7. So it's like, I'd say between the ages of birth and 7 is where there's critical stages of development, not just where
Right.
it's physically critical, but there's like belief systems or thoughts about ourselves and the world and other people are created in that time. So imagine the amount of people that have in this world, whether it was in, say, physically, sexually abusive, or emotionally abusive environments, where they experience certain things, or even to the point where it's like, no, you didn't experience any of that, but you just weren't given the loving, nurturing, and attention that a human deserves. So you've grown up in this environment where, as I said, so it doesn't have to have been anything that was like obvious happened, but you were just maybe a child that grew up on their own, and
Right.
mum and dad had stuff going on, or maybe mum and dad had their own kind of things going on, where not like they were out all the time, or maybe they weren't arguing, but they just didn't give loving, nurturing attention. So then what you, as a child and then teenager and then adult, you grow up thinking that that's what you deserve. You I guess attract a partner which will, even though you want more, but you'll
Yeah.
attract a partner that mimics those kind of relationships. I'm like, man, I'm so fascinated by this stuff, because it's like what that can cause for people that don't understand, like why that is happening and all that. And we can talk about attachment theory and all that kind of stuff. Like, I'm just so passionate and so fascinated about sharing this kind of information for people, whether it's on a podcast, videos, or speaking in person, man. I just like, for someone who just used to be an ex-tradesman who used to love fighting and all that kind of stuff, for me to be able to talk about this now, I'm like, how did I ever get into this? Because I just love it so much. You'd be the same way. Like, for anyone to undertake study in psychology, we have to have a love of this kind of stuff. But I'm like, man, I love this stuff so much. Just to be able to, like, on whether it's for my own sake, for working with other people, but there's just so many interesting factors. But my number one thing is that I love working with people, and I actually personally I would think that most people, anyone that comes across me anyway, most people's, I guess, points in their life that maybe they need to work on in some way would generally stem from things that have happened in their childhood. Most things, but that doesn't mean everyone. But I think I almost can't help but think about it that way, because it's like, if something happened and you were a teenager, or even as an adult a couple of years ago, whether it's a divorce, whether it's something happened at work, or whatever it may be. I actually think that belief systems, or thought patterns, even, or behavior patterns that we created, particularly when we were younger, is actually preventing us from managing whatever this thing is that happened most recently. So it's like, even though it might have happened a couple of years ago, or whatever it may be, I think it's working on that childhood stuff that can really help. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going back and talking to the inner child or anything like that, but there's certain forms of therapy that I really like. One of them is schema therapy. I'm not sure if you've okay. I think it's much bigger in America than it is Australia. It's in its infancy here, but how that talks about, like the maladaptive schemas and all that kind of stuff. I just like, oh man, I just love this stuff so much, because every single person on this planet could fit into one of those. And it doesn't mean they're completely brought down by those, but it's like, it's like, people like doing personality tests and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, no, do this one, do this, because you're like, do the schema tests and see where maybe there's some things that are, not so great in your life, or some things to work on, or at least like gives you some idea of where you might fit into these categories. Because it's like, it gives you like ideas of where you could start making some improvements. Now, I just realized I've spoken a lot just then and probably didn't give you time to talk, but it shows how passionate I am, man.
No worries at all. No, I love it. So, and it gives me a break too, so not an issue there. But for listeners that are interested, schema therapy is a form of CBT, if you want to look into it further. But I do agree with you. I think, I also have a strong belief that a lot of our programming obviously happens in childhood, because those ages that you mentioned, whether it's 7 or 2, we're so vulnerable as children. And it's such a critical age for development that, something can be experienced as traumatic. And again, trauma is very relative, and you can't really compare it to someone else's experience. All you can really compare it to is your own lifetime. And if you've experienced something that you believe in comparison to your entire life was traumatic, that could stick with you. And often the smallest thing can happen for an individual that shapes their entire life pattern. And maybe you agree with it a little bit, but from based on what you've shared and your own experience, is that it's probably fair to assume that you naturally gravitated towards youth originally because of what you had gone through.
Yeah, I guess that's a thing I just wasn't aware of.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just whether that was just a thing that like the universe was pushing me into, going, no, this is, whether you like it or not, it's happening, or whether there was just like I do just have this love of like working with people in those environments. A young person that is in an environment that they've got no power to be a part of, but like no power to be like not a part of, because that's just what they grew up in.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I love working with that, because it's like I want to help that kind of person that realize that just because they're in like I guess a negative environment, or not so not so good environment, doesn't mean that they're not good. But this is what people think. Like 99% of people that grow up in that environment would probably think that they're in a shitty environment, they're being treated bad. Well, they must be bad.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess one of the things for me, and I think we've talked about it a little bit here, but you've mentioned you've been able to pivot around and find ways around doing school. But how have you been able to adapt to like everyday life? To, you mentioned you can't drive, and like even with the school getting audiobooks and journals. But how are you adapting on a day to day basis and compensating for that vision and showing up as a person functioning in society?
And that's a really good question too. So I think most of my life, or most of my day to day life now, like people wouldn't know. So like if as I'm at work and I'm walking around, or I'm like walking home or going to school, like going to work or whatever, I'm in a cafe or whatever, getting like people wouldn't know, because I guess my eyes don't necessarily, or sometimes they probably do, but most of the time I don't look like I can't see very well. So I'm just someone who, like, instead of driving, I walk everywhere, or I get taxis, or I still go to the gym, I still do wrestling, I still do jiu-jitsu, I still jump on the trampoline as a dad. It's like, like nothing is going to stop me from being an active person
Yeah.
in this world. I just do it differently. And I guess I still manage with the small amount of vision that I've got to be, I guess, as active and as I guess involved in this world as I possibly can. I just do it a little bit differently. So yeah,
Mm.
I can't read, but I zoom in, or I listen, or like I still make videos and edit on Instagram, whatever it may be. It's like you just got to do it differently, and
Mm.
it's I guess it's that mindset that just, I don't necessarily have to even think about it. It's just there. It's like, well, okay, I might not do it how everyone else does it, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm just going to be an active participation in life to the fullest extent. And I'm like, well, I'm not sure exactly how that's going to happen sometimes, but I know it's going to happen. But yeah, like I would be like, I'll give you an example. So when I was finishing doing the honours in psychology,
Yeah.
that was taking 25 to 35 hours a week on top of my full-time job. Plus I was doing the podcast, social media stuff. Plus I was doing, exercise and being a dad. It's like, I still do most stuff than the average male human Australian would do. So it's like,
Yeah.
I don't lack in anything there. I just do it differently.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing. And again, everything you've shared here has been very inspiring, and I hope you know that you're very inspiring, especially you've been able to show up, and the way you've been able to manage everything.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I think this one is relatively easy for me, because I think this one covers for like everybody on the planet. So it's like going back to what we're talking about, childhood stuff. You don't have to have experienced physical trauma, emotional trauma, whatever it may be.
Mm.
Like what doesn't matter if you're 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. The way that we kind of grew up, some of the things that might have happened, that we don't know that was great, that we didn't know that was great. It might have been really obvious that it wasn't great, but we're not always aware of that. We're children. We don't know what is happening. Might not be that great, but it doesn't always necessarily matter for what happened back then. But as an adult, it's important for us to question everything.
Mm.
So if we want things in life, but we're not achieving them, why are we not achieving them? Why is there a discrepancy between who we actually are and what we actually want to be, how we want to put ourselves out into the world? I
Yeah.
think one of my best, I guess, pieces of advice for people is question everything. Like, question why this is. Question why you think this way. Question why you think you might not be able to do something when in fact you probably could. Why would you have fear about this? Why would you have anxiety about this? There's probably so many things that have happened that we've just accepted in our brains, ways of thinking, ways of acting, thinking about ourselves, thinking we can't do this, thinking we're not good enough. Like particularly someone who thinks they're not good enough. Why would you think you're not good enough? What has really led you to believe that you're not good enough? Is it like a thought pattern that you created yourself by things that by doing things that maybe aren't that good, or did somebody tell you or treat you in a certain way that led you to think as a child you weren't good enough and you just never questioned it? I think it's like really important, particularly for adults. As I said, maybe when you're going through a big change in your life, maybe in your 30s or 40s, you start to question certain things, or you start to want more in different areas. You're not going out partying anymore, or whatever it is. So I think that's where it really starts to happen. So it's like, you want to get more out of your life? Well, ask yourself why. Why would that be that I'm not getting that? And I think particularly my passion, like to work with people on, is that those that think they're not good enough. Because I could put my life on the fact that you not being good enough or having thoughts that you're not good enough were not thought patterns that you gave yourself. Either experiences you had when you were younger, your child brain maybe processed it that way. Like we talk about schema. The scheme of it, that's a way we process information. I think there's always a way to improve things, close that gap between who we are and what we want to be in now and what we're actually putting out to the world. It's like, question everything though. If you want more out of your life, question why you're not getting it, or why you're not actually putting more of who you are out. Are you scared? What are you actually scared of? Are you scared in a child's brain? Or are you scared in an adult's brain that realistically could handle anything, but you fear the world because like you're reverting back to that kind of old way of thinking? It's like, I think it's so important. Question everything. Question why you don't think enough about yourself. This kind of stuff is so important. And it's like, and don't be scared. Like nothing in this planet will break you if you're not willing to be broken. Like you can handle everything. But a lot of people have this fear and I guess a thought pattern around fear. Because that's, when they first experience fear, maybe it was never, this has come up a bit in things that I've read recently about childhood stuff. It's like, if fear when you were younger was never resolved, you then, like it makes people really scared. It's like, it's scared to take on things, or because like to take on things and then have it not happen, and then to come back to that base where they get nurture and loving. If they never get that when they were younger, it's too scary for them to go out and try things in the world. So I guess actually that's another factor, because I didn't get that. I don't know where my non-fear with certain things comes from, but I'm just so glad I've got that. But yeah, that's a thing. Just question everything, and if you don't think enough about yourself, really question why that might be.
I agree. And one of the analogies I've started to use is basically, when we live in fear, we're essentially choosing to live our lives inside a box, right? We're limiting our life to this little box that we're living in, and the boundaries of this box are our fears, and we limit our potential and our ability to experience this larger, greater world that we could be if we were to question our fears and step outside of this box. And until we don't, we don't fully realize our potential and the experience we can have with this world. And so I think it's important to be aware of that and not limit ourselves to these fears and create these barriers for ourselves. But I'm also being mindful of your time here, and I really appreciate you coming on and having this vulnerable conversation with me and sharing so much. But I guess for listeners that do want to get hold of you, and whether it's social media or find you online, what are some ways they can do that?
Look, I'm on Instagram under the Mind Tradie. There's my website, which is themindtradie.com. I guess TikTok and Facebook. But yeah, look, either website or Instagram is always a way to like message me on there, or send me an email through my website, something like that. That's always easy ways to connect.
And very cool. And I guess what's what inspired you to come up with Mind Tradie? What's the motivation behind the Mind Tradie?
So the Mind Tradie, just it's weird how you kind of just get these things sometimes where they just intuitively like, oh yeah, I quite like that name. But what it was, I guess, but yeah, being an ex-tradesman who now works on, I guess, I built my own mind and constantly keep building my own mind, and and that's what I guess I do with people as well. Like that's what on Instagram I call myself a mind building specialist. And the reason why I said that is because when I was a glazier, when I was a tradesman who worked with glass and splashbacks and showers or whatever I was doing, or mirrors, I called myself a frameless glass specialist. And so I just, you know what, I'm a mind building specialist now. And so, yeah, so that's where the Mind Tradie comes in. So like I just build people's minds, I build my own mind, and I'm constantly building mine. And like I'll constantly find ways to get the most out of myself or build a better foundation. Or sometimes you've even got to break down what you've previously built and start building again. That's okay. You know, that's where the Mind Tradie came out of. Hey, no worries. As I said, thank you so much for having me on. It's always a pleasure and definitely an honor. And I always love the stuff that you put out. You and I have got we've clearly got a very similar passion for this kind of stuff. And even if it means we're not physically working with someone, if the best thing we can do is like, I've got something I really want people to say, and you put videos out like I do. It's like we have clearly got a very similar passion. So I really appreciate your stuff as well. So it's great to be able to connect with someone so similar.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
No worries.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode. As always, please subscribe to the podcast if you enjoy the episodes, or leave a comment in the comment section. I always love hearing from you. Thank you again, and until next week.